The Whitmore family brunch was a monthly tradition that I'd grown to dread. Every second Saturday, we'd gather at my parents' sprawling estate in Westchester County to discuss family business, share updates, and maintain the image of a successful unified family dynasty. The only problem was that I'd never quite fit the dynasty part. "Alexandra, sit up straight," Mom commanded from the head of the perfectly set dining table. "Your posture is atrocious." I straightened my shoulders automatically, a 34-year-old woman still responding to childhood corrections. Around the table sat the usual suspects: Mom in her Chanel suit, Dad reviewing stock reports on his tablet, my older sister Victoria radiating perfection in her designer dress, and her husband Bradley, who worked at Dad's investment firm. "So," Victoria began, cutting into her eggs Benedict with surgical precision, "Bradley has some exciting news about the Wellington account." Bradley straightened up like a proud schoolboy. "Closed the deal yesterday. 15 million in assets under management." Dad nodded approvingly. "Excellent work. That's exactly the kind of client relationship we need to maintain." "It's wonderful," Mom agreed. "Victoria, you must be so proud to be married to such an ambitious young man." I stabbed at my fruit salad, saying nothing. This was how it always went: Victoria and Bradley's achievements front and center, while I existed in the background like expensive furniture nobody really noticed. "And what about you, dear?" Mom turned to me with the tone she usually reserved for discussing minor household problems. "How's your little hobby business?" My little hobby business was a tech startup I'd been building for 3 years. But explaining the complexities of AI-driven financial software to my family was like trying to discuss quantum physics with kindergartners who'd already decided science was stupid. "It's going well," I said simply. Victoria snorted. "Alex, you can't keep pretending that playing with computers in your garage is a real career. You're 34. At some point you need to think about your future." "My future seems fine," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Does it?" Dad looked up from his tablet. "Because from where I sit, you're burning through your trust fund on pipe dreams while your sister is building actual wealth and contributing to the family business." The trust fund comment stung because it was designed to. Yes, I'd used some of my inheritance to fund my startup. No, I hadn't asked for their permission or approval. And yes, they'd been holding it over my head ever since. "Alexandra," Mom said in her most patient voice, "we're not trying to hurt your feelings. We're trying to help you see reality. This technology obsession of yours is embarrassing." "How is it embarrassing?" "Because," Victoria jumped in, "when people ask what the youngest Whitmore daughter does for a living, we have to say you're working on a startup, like you're some college dropout with delusions of grandeur." Bradley nodded sagely. "The family reputation matters, Alex. When Victoria and I attend charity galas or business functions, people expect a certain caliber of family members." I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest. "What caliber is that exactly?" "Successful," Dad said bluntly. "Accomplished. Contributing members of society, not grown women playing entrepreneur in their spare time." "You're embarrassing the family name," Mom declared, her voice carrying across the dining room with the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years perfecting the art of public disappointment. Victoria nodded in complete agreement, her expression a perfect mirror of Mom's disapproval. That's when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Captain Rodriguez, my pilot. I'd been expecting his call. We had an important meeting scheduled for this afternoon that might require some last-minute logistics changes. "Excuse me," I said, standing from the table. "I need to take this." "Of course you do," Victoria muttered. "Always something more important than family time." I walked to the far corner of the dining room and answered quietly. "Hi, Captain Rodriguez. Ms. Whitmore, I'm sorry to interrupt your family time, but we have a situation. The helicopter pad at Teterboro is backed up due to an emergency landing, and we can't get clearance for another 2 hours. The Seoul executives are insisting on the 3 p.m. departure time for the merger signing." My heart rate spiked. The merger with the Korean tech conglomerate had been 18 months in the making. Missing this meeting could cost us the entire deal, and the deal was worth more than my family's entire net worth. "What are our options?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Well, your parents' property is large enough for an emergency landing. The backyard could easily accommodate the G650. I could have us down in 15 minutes if you can get clearance from the local tower." I looked back at my family still sitting around the brunch table, still discussing my failures and embarrassments. The irony was almost too perfect. "Do it," I said. "Emergency landing approval for business necessity. I'll handle any local issues." "Copy that. ETA 15 minutes. Fair warning, the G650 makes quite an impression when it lands." I hung up and returned to the table, where the conversation had apparently moved on to discussing Victoria's upcoming promotion to partner at her law firm. "Everything okay?" Mom asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly interested in the answer. "Actually, yes. Everything's about to be very okay." Dad frowned. "What does that mean?" I sat back down and checked my watch. 14 minutes until my world collided with theirs in the most spectacular way possible. "Tell me something," I said conversationally. "When you think about success, what does it look like to you?" Victoria rolled her eyes. "Alex, please don't turn this into one of your philosophical discussions. I'm genuinely curious." "Dad, you measure success by assets under management. Victoria, you measure it by partnership tracks and billable hours. Mom, you measure it by social status and family reputation. Is that accurate?" "Those are all legitimate measures of success," Dad said carefully. "Unlike whatever metric you're using to evaluate your computer hobby." "Fair enough. So if someone were to, say, build a technology company from nothing and sell it to a Fortune 500 company for, hypothetically, $800 million, would that count as success by your standards?" The table went quiet. Bradley laughed nervously. $800 million? That's very hypothetical. Or, I continued, if someone were to develop AI software that revolutionized financial trading and was being implemented by banks across 3 continents, would that qualify as contributing to society? "Alexandra," Mom said sharply, "what are you getting at? I'm trying to understand why you think I'm embarrassing the family name when I've built something that's about to make me wealthier than all of you combined." Victoria's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "What are you talking about?" That's when we heard the first rumble of jet engines in the distance. I checked my watch again. Right on time. "You want to know what I've been doing in my garage for 3 years?" I stood up from the table as the engine noise grew louder. "I've been building the most sophisticated AI-driven financial analytics platform ever created. It can predict market movements with 94% accuracy, process millions of transactions in real time, and adapt to changing market conditions faster than any human trader." The jet engines were getting closer now, loud enough that Dad had to raise his voice. "What is that noise?" 6 months ago, Samsung Financial approached me about licensing the technology. 3 months ago, they made an acquisition offer. Yesterday, I accepted. The noise was overwhelming now. Through the dining room windows, we could see my Gulfstream G650 approaching the backyard, landing gear extended. $820 million, I said, having to shout now over the engine noise. Plus a 5-year consulting contract worth another $200 million. Plus royalties on future developments. Mom's coffee cup slipped from her hands and shattered against the marble floor as the private jet touched down on their perfectly manicured lawn, sending a spray of grass and dirt against the dining room windows. The engines wound down slowly, leaving us in relative silence except for the sound of Mom's breathing, which had become rapid and shallow. "That's my ride to Seoul," I said casually. "I have a merger to finalize and contracts to sign. The Korean executives don't like to be kept waiting." Victoria was staring out the window at the jet like it was an alien spacecraft. That's your plane?" "One of them. The Bombardier Global 7500 is being refueled in Dubai, and the Falcon 8X is in maintenance this week." I picked up my purse from the sideboard. "I've been meaning to mention, I'll be relocating to Seoul for the next 2 years to oversee the technology integration. I probably won't make many family brunches." Dad finally found his voice. $800 million? $820 million. Plus the consulting fees, plus the royalties, plus my retained equity stake in the new subsidiary. I headed toward the door. "Oh, and Dad? I paid back every penny of the trust fund with interest. The check should clear on Monday." I paused at the dining room doorway and turned back to my stunned family. "Victoria, when people ask what the youngest Whitmore daughter does for a living, you can tell them I'm a tech entrepreneur who just closed one of the largest AI acquisitions in Silicon Valley history. I think that meets your caliber requirements." The walk to the jet felt like a victory lap. Captain Rodriguez was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, impeccably professional despite having just landed a $70 million aircraft on a suburban lawn. The Korean team is standing by for video conference during the flight, he informed me. And your assistant called. Forbes wants to schedule an interview about the acquisition. Schedule it for next week, I said, climbing the stairs. I'll have more details after the merger is finalized. As the jet took off, I looked down at my parents' house. My family stood in the yard, still stunned. My phone buzzed. From Victoria, we need to talk. From Dad, I owe you an apology. From Mom, I'm proud of you. I smiled. Apologies were nice, but they didn't erase 3 years of doubt. At cruising altitude, I opened my laptop. In 6 hours, I'd finalize a deal with Samsung that would make me one of the youngest billionaires in tech. Interview requests filled my inbox, CNN, Wall Street Journal, Harvard. But the message that made me smile was from Professor Chin. Always knew you'd do something special. He had believed in me when my family hadn't. By the time we landed in Seoul, the news had gone worldwide. Samsung executives welcomed me as a peer. The chairman shook my hand. Your technology will change everything. We're honored to work with you. Not an embarrassment. Not a hobbyist. A visionary entrepreneur. I signed the papers. The biggest AI deal in Asia's history. My family back home would need time to understand. But I no longer needed their approval. On the flight back, news outlets wanted interviews. My banker wanted meetings. My lawyer wanted tax discussions. But what I wanted most was to call Professor Chin and thank him. As New York came into view, Victoria texted, "Dinner this week? I need to apologize." I typed back, "Thursday. My choice of restaurant. Because if we were rebuilding, it would be on my terms." The girl in the garage was done being ashamed of her success.